together for author of Elite Reclamation, reading from his new, soon-to-be published novel, Emanation. There's a theme there, nations. Mr. Drew Wagar.
Hey, thank you very much. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you all for turning up. It's lovely to see so many of you come along. Yeah, particularly kind of towards the end of the event, where I know that the effects of last night and various other bits and pieces are beginning to kick in, and the coffee's perhaps not quite as effective as it once was. So, thank you very much for coming. What I'm going to read from you today is from a book that isn't out yet. It's coming out in October. After I finished Elite Reclamation, I was hoping that there might be the opportunity to write another Elite book, but so far that opportunity hasn't materialized. So I decided not to wait. And when in 2012, when the whole Elite thing kind of suddenly kicked off, literally kicked off with the Kickstarter at the end of 2012, I was working on this project, and I was about a third of the way through at the time, because I'd kind of wanted to write my own science fiction story. And the trick with that was that Elite, while it was a huge amount of fun to write, and I got to talk about cobras and space battles and all those kind of great things that we love about Elite, there is a downside to writing in the Elite universe, and that is that you have to follow somebody else's rules. So when I originally submitted my synopsis to David Braben for my Elite Reclamation book, it came back with nope, 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 and nope. So it was kind of like, oh. And it took me 3 months to get my story tweaked enough that it was okay to work in the Elite Dangerous universe. And there's lots of things like, I didn't really like the fact that we didn't have anti-gravity technology in Elite. That was irritating to me because everything else was so fantastical. I thought, well, why can't they just have that as well? But that was a golden rule, and David Braben had spoken, and that was that. So I had to put up with no gravity technology, so it was 0G in your spaceship, which meant for me, I basically just landed my spaceships whenever anything important had to happen, because I couldn't be bothered with writing people floating around in the vacuum. So there were lots of downsides, and I loved writing that, and I'll do another one if the opportunity presents. But it was irritating because every so often I had to keep checking things with Frontier to say, can I do this or can I not do that? And I wanted to do some things, and they said, no, you can't do it. And I was like, well, okay. So then I found another way around it. And I did eventually come up with what I hope you agree is a half reasonable story. And that's a piece of history now. But with this, what I was able to do this is entirely my own creation. It's entirely my own universe. I'm answerable to nobody other than myself in the creation of this story. And so I've gone to some lengths to work out the backstory, and that makes sense for me. And I've gone at some length to work out the technology and how it works. And so I've come up with something that's still science fiction, but it's probably harder science fiction than Elite is. It's less fantastic. There are no hyperdrives here. There are no visible lasers because they don't exist actually at all. There isn't a speed limit in space because there isn't a speed limit in space. Those sort of things. And that's not to diss Elite. Elite is a game, and you have to have something that's fun to play. And as we encounter with Frontier, quite so much fun as perhaps it could have been. And that's the difference between a game and a kind of real life scenario. So to introduce this, the basic premise is here that at some point in the not too distant future, something has gone wrong on the Earth. And I haven't given you the detail of that because, quite frankly, I haven't worked out what it was. Well, I didn't need to yet. And we've had to evacuate. And we've evacuated in a bit of a hurry. And the places we've gone to are not very far away. They're within maybe a dozen light years of the Earth, because that's as far as we could get with the technology we had. And we then pick up the story a little bit later to figure out what has happened to the colonists that set out. If any of you have read, you shouldn't be writing that. If any of you have read there's a little prologue at the end of Elite Reclamation which introduces you to this, and there's a character in there that you'll have seen in that story, and this explains a little bit of the backstory, but also what happened next to that character. So with no further ado, I shall read from Emanation, book 1 of 4 or 5, I'm not quite sure yet, of the Shadewood Saga. The LaSalle system was not a primary colonization target. Red dwarf stars were considered generally poor candidates, and the system was relegated to the lower end of the league table. The only reason it was considered at all was that, at a distance of just over 10 light years, it was within range of ships powered by the new atomic pulse engines, a factor that eventually became critical. Azurio lay just within the outer boundary of the cell's Goldilocks zone, a red dwarf star, which would mean that metals would be in short supply, but that could be countered by technology. It might support a simple agrarian culture. But further analysis quickly dashed those hopes. Lascaux's peculiar properties made the colonization of Azurio problematic for many reasons. The star was extremely faint and cool, with the planet in an alarmingly close orbit. Conditions on the surface ranged from the extreme to the astonishing. Tidally locked to its parent star, one side of the planet always faced the glow of ruddy sunlight, but the other was shrouded in eternal night. An everlasting hurricane raged on the substellar pole, fed by ferocious evaporation from the surface due to the intense heat. At the terminator, kilometre-high cliffs of ice marked the transition into the dark side. Images showed a temperate zone between the two extremes. There was no evidence of any intelligent life, yet there was something there. Sensors confirmed the telltale presence of methane in the atmosphere, and there was evidence of widespread vegetation. With long-term viability uncertain, and the rigors to be endured by any prospective colonists considered insurmountable, Azurio was marked as non-viable and overlooked in favor of more conventional spheres by the committees of the homeworld. That was until those same committees were awakened to the knowledge that before long they would have no homeworld. The resultant program was rushed, with provisions and equipment paired to the absolute minimum. The timescales allowed no other outcome. The known issues were immense and intractable, but they were overcome, though often by controversial and experimental means. But after much sacrifice and difficulty, Azurio was colonized, but only the brave and the hardy survived. Silence fell in the hall. Kiri caught her breath, knowing that the judgment might mean her existence could soon be coming to a swift and painful conclusion. She forced herself to breathe, gasping in short breath intakes, the tenseness in her chest forcing her to swallow painfully. Narina, the high priestess, looked across at Handela and then towards Charis and finally back at Kiri before speaking. In the case of Kiri and Choso, there is no evidence of theft, there is no evidence of murder. No crime can be proved, merely an unfortunate accident caused by untempered youthful exuberance. Given the wounds inflicted on the subject after the event by the crowd of onlookers, I deem she's already suffered sufficient punishment to atone for this. Kiri let out the breath she'd been holding. Handela was on her feet immediately, spluttering her protest, her family beside her, gesturing angrily. Narina held up a hand, all the time keeping her gaze locked on Kiri. And she waited until Handela subsided. This young woman will promise not to repeat her behavior. She will be released back into the city once she's healed. We will hear no more of it. Narina thumped her palm on the table, and the sharp noise echoed through the silent hall. Kiri smiled and looked over at Charis. Her heart clenched when she saw the look on Charis's face. It was one of despair, not joy. This was not the verdict she had wanted. I don't understand. And then she realized, once she was outside of the protection of the temple, it would be easy enough for Handela and her guards to find her. She was already guilty of many small misdemeanors. Handela would have no difficulty trying her in her own jurisdiction, finding her guilty, and she looked over at the bugwoman. Handela had clearly been having the same thoughts. She caught Kiri's stare, and one of her sons drew a finger across his throat and smirked at her. They would ensure she suffered once they caught her. They'd keep her alive as long as they could, taking retribution for the death of their son and brother. This quisition is dismissed, Nerina said. Everyone save Kiri rose. Kiri saw Charis get to her feet and move towards her, but Nerina held up her hand again. I wish to discuss the subject's release with her, Nerina said. I will summon you when I'm done. Charis nodded. On the other side, Kiri saw Handela's eyes narrow. Charis and the other priestesses filed out neatly, but Handela and her family were next. One of the brothers, the older one, passed close to Kiri, whispering under his breath, Dead meat, slum. Word will be on the street in a spell. Dead meat. Kiri ignored him, but her heart fluttered in panic. After a moment, the double doors closed, leaving Kiri alone with Nerina. The elegant woman walked around the desk and leant against the front of it languidly, regarding Kiri with a steady eye. I could have you sentenced here and now, Nerina said. The word of a guard takes precedence in any other circumstance, despite your truth and her lies. That might have been kinder, a quick, painless death at our hands, rather than a slow, brutal one at theirs. Kiri glared back, trying to quell the anxiety rising in her chest. I'm not afraid of them, or you. Nerina smiled. Whether you fear them or not matters little. Pain is pain. Do you really think you can elude them? Done it for years, Kiri retorted. They're slow and stupid. Why should now be any different? Because they're not going to tolerate your presence, as they have until now. They'll hunt you, capture, kill those you care about. I care about no one. There was a pressure in her mind, along with a sense of impatience. Kiri winced. It made her head throb. The priestess had some strange ability. It echoed inside her head. Learn this well. I hear your thoughts. You can't lie to me. You can't hide from me. And you can't resist me. Kiri pushed back, struggling to articulate her own thoughts. It was unfamiliar to her, but she began to understand how to form and control words in her mind. She batted the thoughts back towards Nerina. I will fight like I've always done. Just give me a knife. Give me a chance. Images suddenly flashed through her mind. She saw with crystal clarity her friends caught by Handela and her guards, girls violated, boys tortured, those she knew just broken bodies burnt on stakes or ripped apart by teams of hergs, an image of herself being led to a scaffold, hands bound, clothing torn, red-hot instruments ready, a noose. She recoiled, closing her eyes, but the images were in her mind and she couldn't shut them out. She felt sick, gasping and choking. Her defenses were shattered, but Nerina persisted. She will wreak bloody vengeance on you and yours. You know she will. No one cares for you slum dwellers. Kiri clenched her fists and forced the images away, desperately struggling against the pressure in her mind. Then I'll go to her, give myself over and get it over with. The pressure faded and the images vanished. Kiri almost pitched forward in response, her breath ragged as she tried to regain her composure. She bit down on her tongue, trying to stop from vomiting as a wave of nausea washed over her. She looked up to find Nerina regarding her steadily. You have a measure of courage beyond your rounds, young one. Perhaps you might consider an alternative? The gentle voice was a shocking contrast to the lurid images. Kiri looked at her, bemused. What alternative? Kiri straightened. Join us, here. Become an acolyte of the temple. Me? It made no sense. Common-borns were never selected as acolytes, only youngsters from those inside the temple, those high-born among the priestessship. Choso had been right about that. You had to be of noble birth. It just didn't happen. You have a remarkable gift, Nerina continued. By that, you know that well enough by now. You can waste it in a brave and futile stand, or a choice. There's no choice, or an offer too good to be true. Nerina wants my gift, that's clear enough. And what would I have to do? Kiri asked, her eyes narrowing. You'd join as one of our candidates, Nerina replied. There are various rituals you'd need to be done, conducted. Training too, much of it arduous. You would have to forsake your previous life and their associations in their entirety, undertake duties as the priestesses deem necessary without question, She was interrupted immediately. Do not make the choice lightly. It will not be easy, and there will be no going back. Kiri stuck out her chin. And what does your temple offer me? Narina laughed as in delight. Well, protection for a start. Handela and her guards would never be able to touch you. In fact, they'd be sworn to protect you. Candids enjoy special privileges beyond the commoners. If you prove yourself, you might become a priestess given time, and even you know what that means. Power, control, privilege, esteem. There's no higher station to be a priestess, save the high priest herself. Ruler of all Drayden. Kiri gasped at the sheer enormity of it all. So, Narina asked her gently, her voice barely above a whisper, will you become a Candid? A student? Follow where we lead and become beholden to us? She's saving my life. I guess I owe her mine in return. Seems a fair trade. Kiri looked up and nodded briefly. Narina's eyes glittered with pleasure. There was a faint pressure in her mind again. Instantly, Kiri understood the momentous nature of the commitment she was making at a deeper, more significant level as she felt Narina's mind touch hers. What had Charis called it? Seeing the gift. This is what you are committing to. She understood. She was leaving her past behind. No, not just her past, her entire previous self. This was a new start, a new life. From this point forward, she would be Kiri, a Candid of Dane. All that had gone before, none of it mattered any longer. The price of salvation was undying loyalty, complete and utter devotion to this religion, to these priestesses. She could see both the opportunity and the hardships ahead. They were exhilarating, intoxicating, terrifying all at once. I could be a healer like Charis. Or you could be a warrior, a fighter, someone who could help us turn the tide. All of this flashed through a blizzard of feelings and exchanges in her mind in brief moments. Now you know of what we've thought to each other. Do you consent? Kiri knew Narina would detect any deceit or trickery through the mental link. There was no way she could hide her response, no way to prevaricate. It was truthful acquiescence or complete refusal. There was no middle ground. Kiri took a deep breath. I consent. She'd never been so certain of anything in her life. The impression she left surrounding her words glowed with a purity of unadulterated honesty. But as the link dissolved and Narina leant back again, the words of Charis's companion Mirren crossed Kiri's mind as if in afterthought. You know Narina, she always gets her way. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Drew Wagar. Yep, our next author up is Kate Russell, author of Mostly Harmless.
Now, I just want to test my 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you give me a little more volume that's this far back so that I can get louder? Is that possible? I've prepared a little backing track. I kind of hope it works. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Yeah, perfect. Great, lovely. Right, when you're ready, you can hit. Strap in, commanders. Okay, so this is chapter 7. It's the first fight scene. Angel has is just about to jump into hyperspace with her belly full of gold for the first time, and she's got Cram, who is an old colleague of hers from flight school, who's not a terribly good combat pilot. They call him Tailspin for obvious reasons, and he is her escort, and she's not very happy about the situation. Angel nudged the nose of the Cobra into perfect alignment with the jump corridor, etching itself out in a thin matrix across the HUD. As the ship locked onto the trajectory, she sank back into her command chair, the G-force of rapid acceleration pressing against her whole body like a hungry lover. They'd done this many times before, her ship and her, but she still felt the thrill of it when the hyperspace drive kicked in. The engines throbbed, vibrating the air around her and making her teeth rattle as the ship screamed towards a crack of impossible brightness blossoming on the black canvas of the non-horizon. A rip in space and time she could slip into for a shortcut through reality.
2, 1, engage.
Hyperspace. She didn't really get the science behind it, so remained in awe of the magic even after thousands of jumps. In an instant, the space in front of her roared with incandescent energy, and they were sucked between dimensions. For a heartbeat, it was like all reality went white. Perfectly, completely, and quite unremarkably white. Even sound turned white in that instant, and then almost before it began, it was all over again. Hyperspace spitting her out light years from where she'd started, regurgitated back into normal space like a cosmic furball. Time's up, energy spent, time to fuel up before jumping again. Hop, 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 like a space bunny trying not to run into a fox. I beg your pardon. Doris whirred, detaching itself from the wall and hovering over to look at the HUD readouts. Are you still here? Angel looked to her right to see Cram's ship spat out just behind her. Good, he was managing to get that right at least. She sat there cold, ship's systems on minimum, shields down, waiting for the sector to be drawn up on the holodash in front of her. She gazed at the red dwarf they were here to visit, to scoop up a bit of fuel before making the last 2 jumps to payday. The fading sun glowed a pinkish red through her windscreen, crystallizing ice creeping in from the corners and framing it in a twinkly light. So beautiful, like candlelight at a romantic table, she mused, and then mentally thumped herself several times in the face for having such a ridiculously sentimental thought. Okay, quick scoop and let's get on our way. This area is hot for piracy, so let's run as cold as we can. Try and stay out of sight, okay? Sure, Captain. The voice over the comms link was snarky. If you can't stand the heat, stay cold like a turkey. I got ya. Angel frowned. What does that even mean, you freak? Because it stopped. The music stopped. Angel frowned. What does that even mean, you freak? Dorid started making ticking noises. Oh, damn, they've been scanned. What? Angel grabbed a keyboard out of its slot and started hitting keys, bringing up the scan logs. Oh, piss and gravity. Doris was right. There was a ship in range, something big and bad looking. We've been spotted, Cram. Sector G15, someone is definitely showing an interest. I'm going to put up my shields and hope they didn't spot the gold yet, but get ready for company. Right you are. I'm on it, Commander. She looked out of the side window at Cram. He grinned like a moron and gave her the double thumbs up. Just keep your hands on your flight stick, Tailspin, and don't let anybody get on my arse. Her own scanners now hard at work to assess the danger. She saw the wedge shape of a third lance sketched out on the dash. This ship was built with one purpose in mind: destruction. It was bristling with armaments. Hard points loaded up with shield-crushing cannons and missiles, hull-ripping multi-cannons and lasers mounted on gimbals anywhere else there was room. She swallowed hard. They didn't have the fuel to jump out of there, and the third lance was coming in fast, like a wolf on the scent of its prey. Oh, shit. She looked at Doris, hovering over by the nav panel. Round about now would be an excellent time for you to come up with something brilliant. Its processor chucked and whirred. You can't outrun them. Your shields will probably last 2 hits. My advice is to surrender. Angel stared at Doris. That's it! With all your billions of scenarios analysed and assessed. I could have come up with that myself. In fact, it's what I was just thinking. Sometimes the simple answer is the right answer. So even an idiot can be right occasionally. You're a useless heap of silicon chips at what you are, Angel said, burned by the inference. Doris hummed indignantly, but didn't add anything. Angel looked at the sector map. Celestial objects mapped out in wireframe hologram. There was a small asteroid belt a little way off to port. It might offer them some shelter, a chance to dodge the larger ship like cat and mouse in amongst the flying space rock until help could arrive. It was worth a try anyway. And they could still surrender after the first shot was fired. If a first shot ever even got fired. She punched the keyboard to open a comms link to channel to Cram. I'm going to make a run for it to that rock garden. With a bit of luck, they spent so much on that arsenal they overlooked decent thrusters. If they give chase, just keep them off my back. We're not looking to engage, Cram. We're just sticking our toe in the cosmic pool of can we get the fuck out of here? Okay? Sure thing. Cram sounded far too happy for Angel's liking, considering what was heading their way. And don't get killed, she added, before snapping the comms link off and stepping on the thrusters, pulling the flight stick over hard to bank the ship in the direction of the asteroids. The engines burned fuel, rattling the cockpit and causing her peripheral vision to shudder as she pushed Hope Falls to her limit for normal space. She glanced at the course readout for the third Alliance. Perhaps it was innocently on its way somewhere else and just happened to look like it was making a beeline for them. Perhaps it's possible. This optimistic little fantasy was rapidly quashed as the launch changed course to intercept. It accelerated hard through the distant space as its crew figured out where they were heading. By the clip they were travelling at, it looked like they hadn't skimped on thruster upgrades either. Oh, damn. Time to panic, thought Angel. They're closing in. Okay, take up a defensive position. Just keep your foot to the floor. I'm going to try and slow them down. Cram, don't get killed, you got me? If they even get one solid hit on you, I want you to surrender, because I sure as hell will be. Cram's ship fell out of sight as he dropped behind and to starboard, putting himself protectively between the Cobra and the approaching interloper. Her ship's telemetry sketched out a hologram of the Eagle. It looked tiny beside the Lance, and although she had to grudgingly admire Cram's bravery, it didn't exactly make her feel safe. She tweaked a couple of settings and channeled a bit more power into her own thrusters. She pressed her foot down hard enough to make her thigh muscles quiver. She watched the green dots at the centre of her display pulse softly as the orange dot heading in from G15 got closer and closer with every sweep of the radar arm. She glanced at the sector map just above it. They weren't going to make the asteroid belt before the Lance cut them off. Piss and gravity! Her chest tight, ears pulsing with adrenaline-fueled blood, the seconds stretched out into interminable minutes as the radar sketched out the approaching doom. That's the trouble with space, thought Angel. It was so damn big, everything took forever to arrive, and then suddenly it was there and all over in the blink of an eye. It really jangles the nerves. A couple more radar sweeps, and the Lance registered close enough for Angel to scan its combat computer. Pretty much every one of those bad old guns was powering up and pointing at her. Her HUD began to flash numbers that made her stomach flip over as the hologram of the third Alliance lit up along its fuselage with the various guns coming online. Angel watched with grim despair as two tiny dots detached from the ship's missile launchers, rushing towards her and Cram. Oh, shit! Shit! Incoming!
Under attack.
She took evasive action, yawing to port to put a little distance between her and the Eagle and priming the heatsink vents. Cram nosed up in front of her protectively and fired off his own pair of missiles towards the incoming dots. The radar showed the distance between the two sets of projectiles closing rapidly. 5 clicks, 4 clicks, 3, 2, 1. A puff of orange blossomed in the distance as opposing missiles met and detonated. All gone, but the attacking vessel was already launching a fresh salvo. 4 missiles, and from the look of it, these were going to be heat seekers. She checked her vents were still primed and ready to dump hot waste if the missiles got past Cram. Keep on course for the rocks. I'm going to draw them away from you. Shit, tailspin, don't be an arse. You don't have the shields for close combat with that tank. Ignoring her, Cram broke away from the Cobra in a high, looping arch, swinging the Eagle to starboard at its apex and peeling away as he vented a flood of hot plasma to grab the attention of the heat seekers. It worked. As he banked sharply, all 4 of the missiles adjusted course to match his, locking on to his howling thrusters. Angel checked the readout on her dash. Shit! The missiles might have been tempted by Cram's plasma fart, but the 3rd Lance was still closing on her fast. An orange beam arced experimentally through the blackness, but the Lance was still too far away for short-range weapons to be effective, so it was obviously just meant to intimidate. It worked, thought Angel, as her mind scrambled for ideas in the void of her rising planet. And panic. She was definitely very intimidated. She flicked the comms link over to an open broadcast channel. Mayday! Mayday! All combat-capable ships, this is Alliance Trade Vessel Hope Falls, urgently requesting backup in Sector G12. We're under attack. Any combat-capable ships in range, please, respond! She glanced around her to see Cram trying to spot him. He was off to starboard a few clicks, dancing and twisting the Eagle in a mad ballet as he tried to stay one step ahead of another barrage of missiles. As she watched, he managed to detonate 2 harmlessly in a slew of heat-sink exhaust. But another 2 went slamming into his hull and tail, tossing the small ship about like a stuffed toy in the hands of an exuberant toddler. Angel tapped her keyboard to see how much damage he'd taken. But a chatter of machine gun fire yanked her attention back to her own very tenuous predicament. A spray of tracer fire raked across the windscreen and pinged a rapid assault across the top of her cockpit. The Lance had come up hard and fast, choking her escape route to the asteroid belt with ease. She banked hard to port, the engines roared gleefully as she opened the thrusters, the hull groaning under the stress of the tight turn as pipes and panels throughout the ship's interior popped and fizzed. Her ears roared as fiercely as the engines as adrenaline pumped, her body pressed back into the command chair with the G-force of the maneuver. The cabin was suddenly lit up by twin beams of broiling fire as a beam laser cut up the space in front of her. She flung the flight stick from side to side, corkscrew and rolling left and right to avoid the scorching path of the beams. The whole cabin shuddered and trembled as she threw the Cobra erratically about in the fierceness of battle. Mayday! Mayday! She screamed into an open channel as she wrestled with the flight controls. All combat-capable ships, this is Alliance Trade Vessel Hope Falls. Urgent assistance required, Sector G11. Please, respond! She checked her shield monitor as laser fire raked sizzling gashes across her fuselage once more. 80% and falling with every hit. Her dash was blinking and flashing with a stunning display of system alarms as the onslaught intensified. If no help responded by the time her shields fell to 20%, she would run up the white flag, hand over the gold, and hope to get away with her ship undamaged. Oh, Jesus, where are you, Cram? I'm getting hammered here. There was a brief moment of silence as the tracer fire stopped, and then the radar started bleeping ominously as a volley of small dots were released. 3 headed towards Cram, and the other 3 were headed straight for Angel. She gulped and wheeled the ship through the chill of space, opening the heat sink vent and spewing a blanket of hot matter in her wake to throw off the missiles. A rapid concussion ripped through the cockpit as the missiles took the bait. Cracking open the darkness with blinding light, warheads booming on every side. Angel's head whipped cruelly from side to side as the ship was flung about, hull shrieking. Deep inside the belly of the craft, pipes burst open, vomiting angry steam and gas. The glass in the forward windscreen made an ominous pinking sound as the fuselage twisted in the force of the afterblast swallowing the ship. Angel glanced at the shield readout. 20%. Dear lady, that was a big hit. One more of those and she was toast. She looked out the side window to see the Lance looming up again. Cram was nowhere in sight. She looked at the console. Her heart sank. His ship's wireframe was deconstructing in front of her eyes, replaced by a series of radiation and heat signature data. Before she could run a scan to check for an escape pod, a fresh volley of tracer fire demanded her attention. The Cobra's thrusters howled like a wounded dog as she banked hard to the left, the bullets chipping across her tail rather than ripping through the belly of her hull. Shields were at 18%. She opened up a proximity channel. "This is Alliance trade vessel Hope Falls. Attacking ship, hold your fire. I am lowering my shields. You can have my cargo." She punched a few buttons on the keyboard and dragged the emergency autopilot control into the navigation bin on her dash. The ship banked straight away as the computer took over the helm, flattening out its flight path and decelerating to a safe speed for emergency measures to be deployed. An SOS beacon started flashing on the dash, letting the ships in the vicinity know she was standing down, surrendering. Any more gunplay would mean a reputation hit for her attackers. This was where the madness ended. At least, that's the way it usually went. Sporadic chain gunfire chattered from behind her, plinking across the hull. With the shields lowered, one bullet actually chipped a hairline fracture in the windscreen. It started spreading immediately. "What the?" Angel grabbed her EVA helmet and slapped the comms panel again to check it was open. "Stand down! I said stand down! I've lowered my shields! I surrender! You can have the damn gold! It's not worth my life!" She watched, breathing hard as her assailants banked in a lazy arc and then levelled up to face her across a few clicks of cold space. Now the frantic pace of battle had calmed. She could read the decal on the nose of the lance. 2 broken red rings around a yellow disc with a section cut out, like that Pac-Man character from ancient Earth computer gaming. The ship's name was Majogu's Mutt. The comms link crackled as they patched into the channel. "You have 30 seconds to get your arse into a pod and get clear. I have a new dumbfire missile I've been itching to try out, and your ship looks just about dumb enough for target practice." The voice sounded amused and there were goading cheers in the background. "Hey, wait! I'm standing down!" 29, 28, 27. Piss! Angel hauled herself out of the command chair and propelled herself towards the escape pod. A quick twist and it was open, the pod already powered up. "What about me?" It was Doris. Angel had all but forgotten about the bot. 15, 14, 13. Angel was swinging her feet into the pod now, straightening her body so that she could slip into the narrow cylinder. "I'm afraid you're on your own. There's only room enough in here for one." The bot was saying something else, but Angel already had the hatch pulled closed and was initiating the eject sequence. The tiny chamber hissed with repressurization. 5, 4, 3. She couldn't hear the comms channel anymore, but she was counting down inside her head, praying that the pod would make it out in time.
Eject.
As it popped out into empty space, her ears popped too. The temperature fell sharply, and reality shrank down to a pinpoint. The beating of her heart, the only sound. Her breath came next, fogging up the EVA helmet in front of her eyes. For a moment, inside that misty bubble, the oppressive silence of space seemed inescapably eternal. And then suddenly, the galaxy was torn apart by the screeching din of a violent siren.
Can we have a massive round of applause there for Kate Russell? It was a fantastic reading. Thank you very much, Kate. Well, that concludes the authors' readings today, unless there's someone else that I don't know about. But I think that's it. So thank you very much for everyone. I think we're moving on to potentially an Artemis stream from the other room of the Lave Radio crew playing, which could be quite interesting. Now, Kate, you've got the book on sale here today, haven't you?